My fiancé and his parents publicly mocked my late father at the rehearsal dinner, so I called off the wedding in front of everyone without a second thought. I'm Olivia Reed, 35, and until recently, I was engaged to Ethan, a man I truly believed I'd spend my life with. You're listening to this story on Renvenge Zinnia, where raw truths are unveiled by those who live them. Before we begin, please subscribe and share where you're watching from in the comments so I can know where you're tuning in from. Now I'm going to tell you all about my story. I met him about 6 years ago through mutual friends at a backyard barbecue. He had this amazing smile, was quick with a joke, and we just clicked. I didn't hesitate when I proposed a year ago. It felt like the right time, the right person. At the time, I wasn't just marrying Ethan. I was, in a way, marrying his family too. His parents, Victor and Evelyn, are the type who love being the center of attention. They're loud, opinionated, and always seem to have a take on everything. At first, I thought it was just their personality, but over time, I saw how their entitlement seeped into every aspect of their lives. Before we get into what went down, let me tell you about my dad. His name was Thomas, and he was hands down the best man I've ever known. He passed away 2 years ago after a grueling 3-year battle with cancer. Watching him fight that disease while still putting others first was humbling. He taught me so much about kindness, generosity, and standing up for what's right. My dad wasn't just my rock, he was a lifeline for so many. He had this quiet way of stepping in to help people without making them feel awkward or indebted, just doing what needed to be done. That included Ethan's family. Victor and Evelyn owe him a lot, but you wouldn't know it from how they talk about him now. Back when I first introduced Ethan to my dad, it went well enough. He liked Ethan, told me so, and Ethan seemed polite. But as things got serious, it became clear Ethan didn't really get along with him. It wasn't anything dramatic. Just little comments here and there, like how he'd call my dad overly involved or a bit too eager to lend a hand. It bugged me, but I chalked it up to nerves or him adjusting to a new family. The thing is, my dad did a ton for Ethan's family. Years ago, when their diner was on the brink of closing, he co-signed a $50,000 loan to bail them out. No one else would take the risk, but he believed in them. He even helped them sort out their finances and crafted a plan to turn the business around. It worked. The diner survived, and Victor and Evelyn kept their livelihood. But it didn't stop there. When their industrial oven broke down and they couldn't afford a $10,000 replacement, my dad paid for it outright because he didn't want them to lose business. He never asked for the money back, even though he could have used it for his own medical bills later. That's just who he was. Then there was Ethan's older brother, Nathan, who struggled to finish college because he couldn't cover tuition for his last semester. My dad stepped in and paid the $15,000 so Nathan wouldn't have to drop out. He said, "Education is something no one can take from you." It wasn't just money. He gave time and energy, spending hours helping Ethan's family with bookkeeping advice and babysitting Nathan's kids so he could focus on studying. And let me tell you, not once did Victor, Evelyn, or Nathan properly thank him. Sure, they tossed out a casual thanks now and then, but there was no real recognition of what he'd done. My dad didn't care about that, though. He wasn't in it for the credit. He just wanted to help people. When my dad passed, I was devastated. He was my world, and losing him felt like a piece of me was gone forever. Ethan was there for me during the worst of it, or so I thought. Looking back, I realize a lot of his support was just the bare minimum. He'd say things like, "You need to move on, your dad wouldn't want you stuck in grief." Maybe that was true, but it didn't feel comforting. It felt dismissive. Leading up to the wedding, I started noticing more red flags. Ethan was oddly dismissive whenever I brought up my dad in talks about the ceremony. For example, I wanted a small tribute to him in the vows, and he brushed it off, saying, "Won't that make people sad? Weddings are supposed to be happy." I let it slide to avoid a fight, but little things like that kept piling up. Then there were the comments from Victor and Evelyn. They had this way of talking down to me, like they thought Ethan was marrying beneath him. Victor once joked about how Ethan was upgrading his life by marrying someone from a humbler background. Evelyn would say things like, "Well, we all make sacrifices for love," as if Ethan was doing me a favor by saying yes. It stung, but I kept quiet for Ethan's sake. Looking back, I wish I'd spoken up sooner. Maybe I could have spared myself some heartache, but I kept telling myself things would get better once the wedding was over. I couldn't have been more wrong. Fast forward to about a month before the wedding. That's when things really started to unravel. Like I said earlier, Ethan's parents, Victor and Evelyn, offered to host the rehearsal dinner at a fancy restaurant they had connections with. At first, I thought it was a nice gesture, maybe their way of smoothing over the snide comments and awkward moments from wedding planning. I even told myself this might be them stepping up to show some class. But here's the context. They didn't just offer to host, they made a huge production of how generous they were. Evelyn kept bringing it up, like, "Oh, we've put so much effort into making this rehearsal dinner perfect. It's going to be the talk of the town." Victor chimed in every chance he got, reminding me and everyone else that the restaurant was one of the best in the area, and how lucky we were they secured it. It started feeling less like a gift, and more like an ego trip for them. Still, I was focused on making the wedding happen, so I let them take the lead on the rehearsal dinner. Big mistake. As the date got closer, Victor and Evelyn's true colors shone through even more. Every conversation with them turned into some backhanded comment or passive-aggressive remark. For instance, when I tried to confirm the guest list, Evelyn rolled her eyes and said, "We'll handle it, Olivia. You don't need to stress over the details. Just show up and enjoy." It was a small thing, but it irked me. This was supposed to be our event, right? Shouldn't Ethan and I have a say in who's coming? Then there was the menu. Evelyn made a big deal about curating a high-end dining experience, saying things like, "Oh, we've got the chef creating something really special. Nothing like what you'd find back home, Olivia." That last part was her favorite jab. Back home. She loved reminding me I wasn't from the same social circle as them. I'm from a small working-class town, and they never let me forget it. I tried to brush it off and focus on the big picture, telling myself, it's just one night. Smile, nod, and get through it. But even Ethan started acting strange. He always had this habit of siding with his parents, but in the weeks leading up to the dinner, it got worse. Anytime I brought up an idea or concern, he'd wave it off with, "Olivia, you're overthinking this. My parents know what they're doing." The thing is, it wasn't just about the dinner. It was how they made me feel like an outsider in my own relationship. They treated me like I was lucky to be in the room, like I should be grateful Ethan was willing to marry me. And Ethan? He never stood up for me. If anything, he encouraged it by laughing along or dismissing me whenever I tried to bring it up. A week before the dinner, there was an incident that should have been a huge red flag. Ethan and I were at his parents' house finalizing wedding details. Evelyn was in full control mode, flipping through seating charts and floral arrangements like she was planning a royal event. I suggested switching the centerpieces to something simpler, something my dad would have loved. Evelyn didn't even look up from her binder. She just said, "Oh, Thomas had interesting taste, didn't he? But this is Ethan's day. Let's keep it modern, shall we?" I froze. It was a subtle dig, but it hit hard. Ethan didn't say a word. He just kept scrolling on his phone like nothing happened. I wanted to call Evelyn out right then, but I didn't want to start a fight, so I swallowed my pride and stayed quiet. Looking back, I hate that I didn't speak up. Every little insult and slight was piling up, but I kept brushing it off to keep the peace. The day of the rehearsal dinner finally arrived, and I could already feel the tension in the air. Ethan and I drove to the restaurant together, and I tried to make small talk to lighten the mood. He was quiet, though, scrolling through his phone and barely responding. When I asked if he was excited, he just shrugged and said, "It's just a dinner, Olivia. Don't stress. Just a dinner, right?" When we got to the restaurant, Victor and Evelyn were already there, acting like they owned the place. Victor was at the entrance, shaking hands with guests as they arrived, while Evelyn was busy giving instructions to the staff. The whole thing felt more like a corporate event than a family gathering. The restaurant itself was over-the-top fancy. White tablecloths, chandeliers, the whole 9 yards. It screamed, "Look how important we are." And honestly, it just made me feel more out of place. As guests trickled in, I noticed something off. Most of the people were from Ethan's side of the family, maybe 3 or 4 from mine, my dad, my brother, and a couple of close friends and relatives. Everyone else was either a relative of Ethan's or one of his parents' business associates. It was like they'd turned the rehearsal dinner into a networking event. I pulled Ethan aside and asked what was going on. "Why aren't more of my family here?" I said. He gave me an exasperated look and said, "Olivia, your family's small." My parents had to fill the room somehow. It's not a big deal. Not a big deal. That was his answer for everything. I bit my tongue and went back to mingling, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this dinner wasn't about us. It was about Victor and Evelyn showing off. They'd hijacked what was supposed to be a celebration of our relationship and turned it into their own personal spectacle. After everyone had eaten, the real show started. The speeches. Victor was up first, of course. He grabbed the mic like he was giving a keynote at a conference not talking about his son's wedding. He cleared his throat and began, "Welcome, everyone. Tonight is about celebrating the union of 2 families, our Ethan and, of course, Olivia." He said my name like it left a bad taste in his mouth. I sat there trying to stay calm, but every word was a veiled insult. He talked about how proud he was of Ethan, how he'd always been the star of the family, always knowing what he wanted and going after it. And now he's marrying someone to keep him grounded, he smirked. And I swear a couple of people chuckled. I just stared, wondering if I'd heard him right. Then he launched into a story about how Ethan was a high achiever even as a kid, and how lucky he had their guidance to stay on track. At one point he said, "You know, we've always taught Ethan to aim high, and while Olivia might not be what we envisioned at first," he trailed off, letting it hang like it was supposed to be funny. I could feel my dad and brother glaring at him from across the table. Next up was Evelyn. She strutted to the mic like she was about to accept an award. Her speech started okay. She talked about how much she loved Ethan and how excited she was for the wedding, but then she started making little digs at me. She said Ethan was the perfect son who deserved the best in life and added, "It's a good thing he's patient because he's taught Olivia so much already." I nearly choked on my water. What did Ethan teach me? How to bite my tongue while his parents insulted me at every turn? Then Evelyn turned to me and said, "Oh, we're so happy to welcome you into the family, Olivia. It'll be nice to finally have someone who doesn't mind getting their hands dirty, right?" She laughed, and a few of her relatives joined in. I glanced at Ethan, hoping he'd step in or at least look uncomfortable, but he was smiling along with them. And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, Victor got back up to the mic. He clinked his glass and said, "One last thing before we wrap this up. I want to acknowledge someone no longer with us who played a big role in shaping Olivia, her dad, Thomas." For a split second, I thought he might say something kind, but no. Instead, he said, "Thomas was one of a kind. He had a habit of butting in, didn't he? Always had an opinion on how things should be done." He laughed, and Evelyn chimed in. "Oh, he definitely had strong opinions. Remember how he always insisted on helping us even when we didn't ask?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They were talking about my dad like he was some nosy neighbor. Victor wasn't done. "But in all seriousness," he continued, "Thomas was a generous man. He helped us out a lot, sometimes too much if I'm being honest." He winked like it was an inside joke. The room went quiet, but he kept going. "We'll keep his spirit alive at the wedding. Let's hope Olivia doesn't inherit his enthusiasm for taking charge, though. We wouldn't want her meddling too much, right?" That was it. My face grew hot and my fists clenched under the table. I glanced at Ethan, waiting for him to say something, anything, to shut them down. But he just laughed and said, "Oh, Dad, stop." Like it was all harmless fun. Harmless fun? They were mocking my dad's memory in front of a room full of people, and Ethan thought it was funny. I couldn't believe it. The worst part was that Victor and Evelyn acted like they were being charming. They had this smug look, like they thought everyone was laughing with them. But when I looked around, I could see that wasn't the case. When Victor finally sat down, the tension in the room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. The clinking of forks and glasses resumed as people awkwardly tried to move on from the train wreck of a speech. Ethan leaned over and whispered, "Are you okay?" His tone was casual, like he was asking if I wanted more water, not if I was seething with rage. I didn't even look at him. I just nodded, my jaw clenched so tight I thought my teeth might crack. But then Evelyn walked over to our table. "Olivia," she said sweetly, "I hope you weren't offended. Victor and I just wanted to add a little humor to the evening. It's all in good fun." That's when something snapped in me. I couldn't stay quiet any longer. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Are you serious right now?" I said, my voice low but shaking with anger. "You laughed at every single insult. You didn't even try to stop them." At this point, the whispers in the room started picking up. People were leaning over to each other, murmuring about the scene unfolding. I could feel the weight of their stares, but I didn't care. This wasn't about them. This was about standing up for my dad. Victor stood up, clearly fed up. "All right, Olivia, if you're so offended, maybe you should leave," he said, pointing toward the door. For a moment, I considered it. I thought about just walking out, leaving them to their perfect little dinner. But then I looked around the room at my dad, my brother, my few friends who had come to support me. They were all watching, waiting to see what I'd do, and I realized I wasn't going to let Victor and Evelyn get away with it. Not this time. "No," I said firmly. "I'm not leaving. Not until you understand what you've done." Victor opened his mouth to respond, but I cut him off. "You act like my dad was some overbearing busybody, but without him, you wouldn't even have this restaurant connection. He didn't do any of that for recognition or praise. He did it because he cared. And now you're sitting here trashing his memory like it's some kind of punchline. That's not just disrespectful, it's disgusting." The room went completely silent again. Even Victor looked taken aback, like he didn't know how to respond. Evelyn opened her mouth, but no words came out. Ethan just sat there staring at the table, his face a mix of embarrassment and anger. Finally, Victor muttered, "We didn't mean it like that." "It doesn't matter how you meant it," I said. "What matters is how it came across. You don't get to rewrite who my dad was just because it suits your narrative. He deserved better than that. And honestly, so do I." With that, I stepped back from the table and grabbed my coat. "You want me to leave? Fine, but don't expect me to come back." My dad stood up immediately, ready to follow me out. My brother grabbed his jacket and shot one last glare at Evelyn before joining us. A couple of my friends stood up too, looking unsure but supportive. Ethan called after me, "Olivia, wait!" But I didn't stop. I walked out of that restaurant, head held high, even though my heart was pounding in my chest. Outside, my dad put a hand on my shoulder. "You did the right thing," he said. "Your dad would be proud." I nodded, but I didn't feel proud. I felt angry and betrayed, and I realized something. If he couldn't stand up for me or for my dad, maybe he wasn't the person I thought he was. Part of me thought I'd done the right thing by walking out, but the other part couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't enough. If I left things as they were, Ethan and his family would just spin the story to make me the bad guy. They'd frame it as me being too sensitive or overreacting. No, I couldn't let that happen. This wasn't just about me. It was about my dad, his memory, and what I stood for. I took a deep breath and turned to my dad. "I need to go back in there," I said. "What?" my brother blurted out. "Why? You don't owe them anything." "I know," I said, looking at him, "but I'm not leaving this unfinished. I need to make it clear to Ethan, to his parents, to everyone that I'm done for good." My dad hesitated, then nodded. "If that's what you need to do, we'll back you up." "No," I said, shaking my head. "This is something I have to do on my own." My brother looked like he wanted to argue, but he held his tongue. I turned and walked back toward the restaurant. My stomach was in knots, but my mind was clear. I wasn't walking back in there to cause a scene. I was walking back in there to end things once and for all. People were whispering to each other, stealing glances at the door as I walked back in. Ethan was still sitting at the table, his face pale and his eyes wide. When he saw me, he stood up. "Olivia," he said, "what are you doing?" I ignored his question and walked straight to the front of the room where Victor and Evelyn were still seated, looking far too pleased with themselves. Victor raised an eyebrow as I approached, clearly not expecting me to come back. Evelyn gave me that same fake sweet smile she'd been using all night. "Back so soon?" Victor said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. I didn't bother responding to him. Instead, I turned to face the entire room. "Excuse me, everyone," I said, loud enough for the whole room to hear. The murmuring stopped instantly, and all eyes were on me again. My heart was pounding, but I kept my voice steady. "I have something I need to say." I glanced at Ethan, who was now standing frozen by the table, his hands clasped tightly in front of him. I know this isn't the time or place anyone expected for this, but after what happened tonight, I don't see any reason to wait. I took a deep breath and continued. "This wedding is off." The room erupted. Gasps, murmurs, and the scraping of chairs filled the air as people turned to each other. Ethan's jaw dropped, and his hands flew to his mouth. "Olivia?" "No," he whispered. But I held up a hand to stop him. The room was dead silent now, even the waitstaff frozen in the corners. I turned back to the rest of the guests. "This isn't just about tonight," I said. "This is about the kind of family I'd be marrying into. A family that doesn't respect me, doesn't respect my dad, and doesn't respect the values I was raised with. I can't, and I won't, spend the rest of my life being treated like this." Victor finally found his voice. "You're making a big mistake, kid," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "You're throwing away a good thing over nothing." I laughed bitterly. "Nothing? You think disrespecting my dad is nothing? You think treating me like I'm less than is nothing? No, Victor, the mistake would be going through with this wedding and tying myself to a family that doesn't deserve me." Evelyn looked like she was about to cry, or maybe just embarrassed that their little show had backfired. "Olivia," she said, her voice shaky, "let's not make decisions in the heat of the moment. We can talk about this tomorrow when everyone's had a chance to cool down." "No," I said firmly. "We're not talking about this tomorrow or ever. This is done." I turned to Ethan one last time. His face was streaked with tears, and he looked like he didn't know whether to scream or beg. I walked back toward the door, my footsteps echoing in the silent room. As I reached for the handle, I heard Ethan call after me one last time. "Olivia, please don't do this." I paused for a moment, my hand on the door, then turned back and said, "I already did." Walking out of that restaurant felt like ripping off a Band-Aid. There was a sting, sure, but the overwhelming feeling was relief. It was over. The wedding, the constant disrespect, the feeling of being second best in a family I was supposed to join, all of it was behind me. The next morning, the real fallout began. I woke up to about 100 unread messages on my phone. Most were from Ethan, a few from Victor and Evelyn, and even a couple from random relatives of his I barely knew. The tone ranged from pleading to outright nasty. Ethan's texts were full of apologies. "I'm sorry, Olivia. I didn't mean to hurt you. Please just talk to me." Victor's were more aggressive. "You embarrassed us in front of everyone. You'll regret this." And Evelyn tried to play the victim. "I can't believe you did this to Ethan. He didn't deserve this." I ignored all of them. By mid-afternoon, Ethan showed up at my apartment. I knew it was coming. I'd been bracing for it all day, but it didn't make it any easier. When I opened the door, he looked like he hadn't slept. His eyes were red, his face blotchy from crying. He was still wearing the suit from the night before, like he'd gone straight home and cried himself to sleep. "Olivia," he said softly, his voice shaking, "can we please talk?" I crossed my arms and leaned against the doorframe. "What's there to talk about, Ethan? I made myself pretty clear last night." He flinched like I'd slapped him, but he didn't back down. I know you're angry and you have every right to be, he said, but we can fix this. We can work through it. I shook my head. You don't get it, do you? This isn't something we can just work through. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, his voice cracking as he said, I was scared, okay? I didn't know what to do. Scared of what? I asked, my frustration boiling over. Scared of upsetting your parents? Scared of making a scene? He didn't have an answer. He just stood there crying while I stared at him, waiting for something, anything, that would make me believe he actually understood what he'd done. But nothing came. His eyes widened and he took a step closer. Please, Olivia, he whispered, don't do this. We can make it work. I'll talk to my parents. I'll make them apologize. Just don't end it like this. I shook my head again. It's not just about your parents, Ethan. It's about you. Last night showed me exactly who you are, and I can't unsee it. I deserve better than this. He stared at me for a moment, his face crumpling as the reality sank in. One Saturday afternoon, I was cleaning out my dad's old keepsake box. It was something I'd held on to ever since he passed. Inside were things like his favorite cufflinks, a pair of glasses he used to wear to church, and a vintage pocket watch with a picture of my grandfather inside. That pocket watch had been in my family for generations, passed down from father to child, and my dad had given it to me before he passed. He said, "One day, you'll know the right person to pass this to." I'd kept it tucked safely in the box ever since. It wasn't just a keepsake, it was a piece of him, of our family history. But when I opened the box that day, the pocket watch was gone. At first, I thought I was imagining things. I tore the box apart, carefully searching every corner, but it wasn't there. I checked the drawers where I kept the box, the shelves, even the floor around it. Nothing. My heart sank as the realization hit me. Someone had taken it. The only person who'd been in my apartment recently besides my family and close friends was Ethan. My stomach churned as I pieced it together. He'd come over a few days after the breakup to drop off the engagement ring. He'd asked to use the bathroom before he left, and I'd thought nothing of it at the time, but now it all made sense. I grabbed my phone and texted him, "Did you take the pocket watch from my dad's keepsake box?" A few minutes later, he replied, "What are you talking about?" I didn't buy it for a second. "You know exactly what I'm talking about. The pocket watch my dad left me, it's gone. You're the only person who's been in my apartment recently. Did you take it?" He didn't respond right away, but when he did, his message made my blood boil. "I borrowed it because I wanted to keep a piece of him with me. I thought it would help me feel closer to you." Borrowed? He borrowed it without asking, without even telling me. I couldn't believe the audacity. I called him immediately. When he picked up, he sounded defensive, like he was the victim in all this. "Olivia, it's not a big deal," he said. "I was going to give it back." "Not a big deal?" I snapped. "That pocket watch has been in my family for generations. It's not some trinket you can just take because you feel like it. How could you even think that was okay?" "I just wanted to feel connected to you," he said, his voice trembling like he was playing the sympathy card. "I didn't think you'd notice." "Of course I'd notice," I shouted. "It's my dad's, and the fact that you didn't think to ask me first makes it even worse." He started crying at that point, but I wasn't in the mood to comfort him. "Where is it?" I demanded. "It's at my parents' house," he admitted through sobs. "I didn't want to lose it, so I left it there for safekeeping." That was the last straw. "You took something that didn't belong to you, something that means more to me than you'll ever understand, and you just left it at your parents' house? Are you kidding me?" "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Sorry doesn't cut it," I said, my voice cold. "I'm coming to get it now." An hour later, I was pulling up to Victor and Evelyn's house. My anger had only grown during the drive, and by the time I knocked on the door, I was ready to explode. Evelyn opened it, her fake sweet smile fading when she saw the look on my face. "Olivia," she said cautiously, "what are you doing here?" "I'm here to get my dad's pocket watch," I said bluntly. "Ethan told me it's here." Evelyn's face shifted into a mix of confusion and annoyance. Ethan took a pocket watch. Why would he— Just get it, I interrupted. She narrowed her eyes but stepped aside to let me in. A few minutes later, Ethan came downstairs, holding the pocket watch in his hand. His eyes were red, his face blotchy, but I didn't care. All I saw was the watch dangling from his fingers like it was nothing. "Here," he said, holding it out to me. I snatched it from his hand and inspected it, making sure it was the same one. When I was satisfied, I stuffed it in my pocket and turned to leave. "Oh, Olivia, wait," he said, his voice desperate. "I didn't mean to upset you. I was just trying to save it." "Save it?" I cut him off. "He stole from me, Ethan. From my dad. Like what you'd already done wasn't enough." His face crumpled, and he started crying again, but I didn't stop. I walked out the door, slamming it behind me. In the days that followed, I blocked his number, deleted his messages, and cut off every possible way for him to contact me. I was done with him, his family, and all the drama they brought into my life. Calling off the wedding had been hard, but this was the final nail in the coffin. And as tiring as it was, it also felt like closure. I'd stood up for myself, for my dad, and for the values he'd instilled in me. I knew I'd made the right choice, and for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. Since the wedding cancellation, that family has begun facing severe consequences. Rumors about the chaotic rehearsal dinner spread like wildfire through our social circle in Chicago. Victor and Evelyn suffered a major blow to their reputation as the story of their disrespectful mockery of Thomas circulated. Their once thriving diner, which owed its success to Thomas's earlier $50,000 loan and $10,000 oven payment, saw a sharp drop in customers within weeks. Reviews on local food apps like Yelp branded it a place of bad karma, with patrons boycotting it after hearing from mutual friends. By the end of the first month, foot traffic plummeted by 70%, forcing Victor to lay off half the staff and Evelyn to issue hollow apologies that no one took seriously. The diner teetered on the brink of closure, a stark contrast to its former glory, leaving Victor and Evelyn scrambling to salvage their pride and business. The strain didn't end with their livelihood. Ethan, already devastated by the breakup, found himself at odds with his parents. The tension erupted a month later during a heated confrontation at their home. "You ruined everything with your arrogance," he yelled, tears streaming as he blamed them for losing Olivia. Victor snapped back, "We were protecting you from a bad match," while Evelyn accused Ethan of ingratitude. The rift deepened, with Ethan moving into a modest apartment across town, limiting contact to curt phone calls and avoiding family dinners. Their once close family bond fractured, replaced by lingering resentment and awkward silences, a bitter reminder of the cost of their actions. For me, reclaiming the vintage pocket watch was a turning point. After slamming the door on Victor and Evelyn's house, I held it close, feeling a renewed sense of peace and purpose. The following months were challenging. I took a break from my office manager role to process the betrayal, leaning on my father's memory and the support of my dad and brother. By the 6-month mark, I channeled my energy into my career, enrolling in a part-time law school program to shift from office management to legal advocacy, honoring Thomas's values of standing up for justice. A year after the breakup, my life began to brighten. At a community charity event in Chicago, I met Lucas, a kind-hearted 37-year-old graphic designer who shared my appreciation for family heritage. Our bond grew over coffee dates and deep conversations. Lucas had lost his own father years ago and understood my pain. By the 18-month mark, we were in a serious relationship, with me gifting Lucas a custom-engraved watch face inspired by my father's, a gesture of trust I felt Thomas would approve of. My career took off too, landing me a junior associate position at a local law firm where I championed cases for those wronged by family disputes, turning my ordeal into a force for good. In the vibrant streets of Chicago, 2025, my story stood as a testament to resilience, while Ethan's family grappled with the wreckage of their actions, and Ethan faced the solitude of his choices. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.